BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin.
Alright, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, and on Wednesdays this year, I've been doing a regular segment about the Axeman of New Orleans, an unidentified serial killer who was operating in Louisiana during the early part of the 20th century. And this is part of a multi-part series, but I really wanted this episode in particular to be available as a standalone because it's going to focus on the communication, the letter that more or less created the Axeman persona, because I think that it is universally undisputed that a series of crimes took place in Louisiana during the early part of the 20th century, but where the connections begin or end is heavily debated. And then there's this letter that adds this element of a braggadocious serial killer who is threatening people if they don't have a jazz band playing nearby. So it sounds somewhat confusing, but it added this absolutely new element to the string of unsolved murders, which still are unsolved to this day, but the local media at the time did heavily report on them, and this wasn't something that was privileged information and only available to the police and to confidential sources. No, the residents of New Orleans learned about this very frequently because it was reported in papers such as the Times-Picayune. But before we truly get started, I would like to remind you guys that if you want to follow along with Black Box Online Radio outside of YouTube, you can go over to LaunchPad 1. There's a link to that in the description box. And you can download the audio version as a pure podcast, take it on the go anywhere and anyhow. If you would like to download the video version, you can use YouTube Premium, but that one you have to pay for. LaunchPad 1 is free. And a great way to support all of these efforts is to go over to BuyMeACoffee.com. There's a link to that in the description box. BuyMeACoffee.com allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anyone who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. Every Monday is Zodiac Monday here on Black Box Online Radio, and of course Fridays and anything goes where any subject is fair game. And I've been talking to you guys about the true crime world for several years, and I've been following true crime programs and reading about the activities and even sinister behavior that is committed by individuals because of the true crime genre. And I'm going to be releasing a book of fiction soon called Down the Dark Lane, but after that, I already know the next thing that I'm going to begin writing, and it is nonfiction. I truly wanted to pull different observations from the true crime world and put them together. And I know that sounds very vague in general, but it's not only going to be true crime related, it's just going to be about humanity, about human behavior, about how other people are thinking, because I think that a lot of that has been shared on Black Box Online Radio over the years, particularly in 2019, when I had a big shift in the channel. I used to talk a lot about unsolved mysteries, and I would just simply say, here's what I think happened. But in 2019, I began to notice that the channel was focusing more on criminal psychology by watching programs and reading books and listening to podcasts, I noticed that there were genuine patterns in behaviors, and that is only from the true crime cases. Like you probably do. You probably follow other genres, and I would also read about psychology and self-help and even neuroscience at times. And I would like to find some way to put all of these observations into one. So let's just say I have an entire book mapped out. Just gotta sit down and get started on the keyboard. But until then, I would like to talk to you guys about the Axeman of New Orleans. And to help us out in this episode on the Axeman's letter, I would like to go over to StEmonyLibrary.org that has an article that says, Historical News, the Axeman's Letter. How absurd would it be to open your Sunday paper and to find a letter from a demon that demands that your city reenact the biblical story of Passover, but with jazz? Well, for thousands of people on March 16th of 1919, that was what they found when they picked up the Times-Picayune. The letter contained was written by the Axeman, and it goes on to say that he will take his next victims on a Tuesday night. However, he promised to spare every person in a house in which a jazz band was playing. This wouldn't be the first time the Axeman had killed, and the people of New Orleans had taken this threat seriously. When the night in question came around, it is said that both professional and amateur jazz bands played in house parties across the city, and every dance hall in New Orleans was filled to the brim. It would seem that this appeased the serial killer, as no murders occurred that night. While the Axeman claimed the lives of at least half a dozen people and was never caught, today he is remembered mostly for the odd letter to the Times-Picayune. This letter and the resulting jazz parties would seem unbelievable today if we didn't have the newspaper archived. You can read the notorious letter online and search historical archives for the Times-Picayune. And before I read the letter, I just wanted to provide the condition that the Axeman does appear to be a real serial killer, or at the very least real crimes have been committed, and I've gone through them in the first three parts of this series, mostly in order, beginning with the Maggios and looking at some of the other famous attacks, the attack on Louis Bessemer and Harriet Lowe, the Cortimiglia attacks, the Pepitone attacks. But the Axeman is very inconsistent with his victim profiling, mostly because he targets men, women, and children. The victim in the Cortimiglia case was a child, and there's this alternative theory out there that the New Orleans Axeman wasn't actually a serial killer who was targeting people because of some desire to destroy society. He was a henchman for the mob, or the mafia, a mafioso working for the Sicilian mafia nonetheless. But the problem with that theory is that the mafia who was operating in New Orleans at the time, well, firstly, may not have even still been present, but even if they had been, they didn't regularly target women and possibly did not target children. The mafia would mostly just target men. So this whole angle about how this is some guy who is going after people just either for financial reasons or maybe he's trying to do it for business reasons, that he's going after people because they work in the grocery store business, as many of the victims did, and they're trying to put the competition out of business. Well, that doesn't stand up too well in the mafia angle if they're going after people that are outside of the mafia's profile. Another alternative theory is that the Axeman was a real serial killer, but he simply had some type of grudge against people in the grocery business. I will restate the point that many of the victims either had, they either worked in the grocery store chains or they had a relative like a husband who was working in that profession. Maybe it was someone who ran a failed grocery store. Maybe it was someone who got put out of business by other people. All of that is theoretical. And now we're even going to introduce a new theoretical observation about the Axeman case. And that is related to a particularly interesting characteristic of certain serial killers, such as Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer. This person has allegedly now written a letter either taunting or bragging or threatening to commit other crimes. Let's look at the letter that was sent to the Times-Picayune in New Orleans. And it follows. Esteemed mortal, they have never caught me and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether which surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a fell demon from hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. And in the original newspaper clipping, there is a bold piece of text that says, calls police stupid. When I see fit I shall come again, and claim other victims. I alone know whom they shall be. I shall leave no clue except perhaps my bloody axe be smeared with the blood and brains of he whom I have sent below to keep me company. Some flair of the Zodiac Killer there, perhaps. If you wish, you may tell the police to be careful not to rile me. Of course I am a reasonable spirit. I take no offense at the way in which they have conducted their investigations in the past. In fact, they have to be so utterly stupid as to amuse not only me, but His Satanic Majesty Francis Joseph. But tell them to beware. Let them not try to discover who I am, for it were be better if they were not born than for them to incur the wrath of the Axeman. I don't think that there is any need of such warning, for I feel sure that you police will always try to dodge me, as they have done in the past. They are wise and know bow to keep away from all harm. Undoubtedly, you Orleanians think of me as a most horrible murderer, which I am, but I could be much worse if I wanted to. If I wished I could pay a visit to your city every night. At will I could slay thousands of your best citizens, for I am in close relationship with the angel of death. Now, to be exact, at 12:15 o'clock earthly time on next Tuesday night, I'm going to pass over New Orleans. In my infantile mercy, I'm going to make a little proposition to the people, and here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether to in the nether regions to not harm every person that shall be spared in whose house a jazz band is in full swing at the time. I have just mentioned if everyone has a jazz band going, well then so much the better for the people. One thing is certain, and that is some of those persons who do not jazz it on Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe. Well, as I am cold and crave the warmth of my native Taratarus, Taritarus, and as it is about time that I will have left your homely earth, I will cease my discourse, hoping that thou wilt publish this, that it may go well with thee. I have been and will be the worst spirit that ever existed, either in fact or the realm of fancy. The Axeman. The letter is dated Hell, March 13th, 1919. Its authorship will be subjected to the investigation. It seems to be a warrant in view of the recent axe murders. Now this is under the headline Mysterious Persons Note, dated Hell, signed Axeman. Now, firstly, you guys might be noticing some clues that are tied to the Zodiac Killer mystery, but I think what's more important to remember is that the Axeman crimes first started in 1918, which is 30 years after Jack the Ripper operated in 1888. The entirety of the Ripper activities, allegedly occurred from August to November of 1888. I believe it's August 31st to November 9th, from the slaying of Polly Nichols to the murder of Mary Kelly, which concluded on November 9th. That's a very, very short time frame. The New Orleans Axeman crimes went over a span of 2 years, not 2 years exactly, but 1918 to 1919 in the post-World War I era. And it's really interesting that another unidentified serial killer legend took place in Texarkana, and that is the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, the Phantom Killer, who operated in the post-World War II era, 1946. Now, the Zodiac Killer is operating in the Vietnam War area, but I believe that it would be unfair to call 1968 and 1969 the post-Vietnam era. It seems like it's still somewhat in the midst of things. But the 1960s were very turbulent, so to speak. However, talking about coming from hell and being a spirit from one of the hottest places of hell, that is absolutely reminiscent of Jack the Ripper's From Hell letter. And I think that this letter in its entirety is showing so many elements of the Ripper that it must be paying direct homage to Jack the Ripper, or the Ripper crimes and the Ripper letters, particularly the From Hell letter, would serve as a type of inspiration for this Axeman persona. Now you might be wondering, well, was Jack the Ripper, this English serial killer legend, even discussed in 1918 in New Orleans? I mean, the answer to that is almost certainly yes, because I briefly talked about another unsolved serial killer case on this channel called The Midnight Assassin, and that took place in Texas. However, that was back in the 1800s, and even at the time, people were drawing connections between that case and Jack the Ripper, and that was happening contemporarily. So 30 years later, yes, I believe the crimes of the Ripper would have been easily and widely well known throughout Louisiana. I can't guarantee in every household or something like that, but it would only take one person who was familiar with this to start writing the letters. And as I always stated, the letters and the crimes don't have to be the same person. It's a challenge question. Do you believe that the real killer wrote this letter? And now you guys might want to point out some things that are reminiscent of the Zodiac Killer. And as I said, the Zodiac Killer didn't officially start operating until 1968, although some people dispute that. And that is that this person is talking about how he wants to constantly outsmart the police. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. Well, the Zodiac Killer said very clearly that the police wouldn't catch him because he has been too clever or more clever or something. The Zodiac Killer wasn't too good at spelling, but as you see from this letter, when I was reading it off, it is rather choppy in its own right, although I shouldn't have said that about the Axeman. And it says, "When I see fit I shall come again and claim other victims. I alone know whom they shall be." Again, the Zodiac did some very similar stuff when he's saying that I shall not announce my crimes in the same way because you will slow down my collecting of slaves. And meaning that the Zodiac Killer wanted to die and be reborn in paradise, and those whom he had killed would become his slaves. The Axeman continues, "I alone know whom they shall be. I shall leave no clue, except perhaps my bloody axe be smeared with the blood and brains of those whom I have sent below to keep me company." Again, the Zodiac wants to be reborn in paradise with the slaves, and the slaves are going to be the spirits of those who he has killed, and the Axeman is going to send people below to keep him company. Very, very similar things. And I said in the past from reading about the New Orleans Axeman and talking about the Zodiac Killer that I didn't see a lot of Zodiac inspirations from the Axeman, or I wasn't convinced that the Axeman was an inspiration for the Zodiac. But when you read the letter and when you compare some of the Zodiac's material, yes, absolutely, it seems like there are certain either inspirations or very similar psychological mechanisms, because this Axeman letter is not exactly trying to say simply that I'm a serial killer, I like jazz, please keep a jazz band playing, or else you'll get the axe. No, the Axeman letter is also talking about how there is some type of spirit world in existence, and this person wants to murder people so that they will exist in the spirit world with him once he is dead. And the Axeman says he's going below, the Zodiac Killer says he's going to paradise. It really depends on how you can view what paradise is or what below means. But the Axeman does say that he's a spirit out of hell, which Jack the Ripper said that he was from hell. And are you noticing that there's a lot of intersection between the four serial killers that I've talked about? Jack the Ripper, the Axeman, the Phantom Killer, and the Zodiac. And I think that a lot of it is copying the same narrative, repeating the same narrative, but a big similarity with the Zodiac and the Axeman that should not be downplayed is both of them are trying to convince the general public that they are smarter than not only the citizens but also the police. Now, it says, undoubtedly you Orleanians think of me as a most horrible murderer, which I am, but I could be much worse if I wanted to. If I wished to, I could pay a visit to your city every night at will and slay thousands of your best citizens. The Zodiac threatened to go on a kill rampage, for I am in close relationship with the Angel of Death. Now, here's something that I don't think the Zodiac or the Ripper might have exactly said. I mean, anything about the Angel of Death. Jack the Ripper says more things along the line of he wants to write in blood, but the blood turned thick like glue, so red ink will have to do. And the Zodiac is also saying that there's just this thing inside of him that's driving him to kill. No, they both seem. All of these serial killers are demented. However, this one definitely pays very close attention to the existence of spiritual beings outside of himself. Now, to be exact, at 12:15 o'clock earthly time on next Tuesday night, I'm going to pass over New Orleans in my infantile mercy. I'm going to make a little proposition to the people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether region that every person shall be spared in whose house has a jazz band in full swing. I have just mentioned, if everyone has a jazz band going, well then, the better for the people. Or so much better for the people, excuse me. Okay, something very important here. You might be wondering, is this consistent with the person who has been committing the crimes? And this is not the first series that I've done on the New Orleans Axeman here on this channel. And I think the reason why I was so, not like, so taken away from the Zodiac case and the Zodiac similarities was because I was just trying to ask and answer that question. Was this letter actually written by the real killer? And I immediately thought almost certainly not. This does not seem like the cold, methodical, and calculating person who actually killed people. This seemed like an attention seeker. And the next question, right? Who would create something like that? What kind of person would create a letter like this if he wasn't the actual killer, and what would be the motive? Well, unlike the Ripper case and unlike the Zodiac case, I might be able to answer that for you, and it's not my own original observation, but an out-of-work jazz musician, and it's something that's been discussed by Miriam C. Davis, and I heard this in the very first podcast that I ever listened to about the Axeman, when she said that just an out-of-work jazz musician might have been responsible for the letter because he wanted to be paid to play at one of these events. And before you think that's a ridiculous idea, it worked. I mean, the local newspaper has reported that the bands were playing in full swing, but someone would have a motive to fabricate the letter, taking advantage of the crimes. But this is an example of someone taking credit for crimes that he did not commit. And it makes you wonder, though, okay, if there are serial killers out there, real serial killers and real crimes, and they are being committed, what would happen if someone were to write letters taking credit for crimes that he didn't commit? Well, what would that look like? I think in the Axeman case, this could be a very likely example. Now, I don't know 100%. Maybe this was written by the real killer. It's an unsolved case. But I lean toward this being not exactly a hoaxer or a prankster, maybe grifter, someone who is deceiving the public and is doing it for profit. But I really want to go back to this whole concept of it's not very original, even though it sounds threatening, and he's talking about being this type of spirit person from hell, and he was going to pull people to accompany him to hell and such, or down below as he called it. A lot of that just seems to be a recycled narrative that is used in other taunting serial killer letters, And the sad thing is, that is where I think I'm going to leave it for this particular episode. But I would also invite you to go back and listen to some of the other episodes that I've done about the Axeman outside of this series, because you'll hear a completely different set of observations in the segments that I did last year on the channel. And I think that's one of the good reasons why we can have ongoing series here on this channel. I started talking about the Phantom Killer back in 2019, and then I've made all types of new observations about that particular case. Jack the Ripper I didn't get around to until 2021. The first episode that I did was on the murder of Long Liz Stride, which again was a possible Ripper victim. She's counted as a confirmed Ripper victim, even though there's like a very low chance that she was actually killed by the Ripper, so says me anyway. And in 2021 I started talking about the Axeman case, but I do ongoing series on the channel about these mysteries, because when you go back and look at them a second time, or a third time, or a 500th time, you see new things and you begin to think about things in a different way. So please share anything that you have about the Axeman's letter, and I would love to know what you have to say. And the important thing to remember is real crimes were committed. There was a serial killer who used an axe and would break into people's homes and attack them. But are the killer and the letter writer the same person? I vote for most likely not, but what do you think? Put your ideas in the comment section down below. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there's always BlackBoxNet88 over on Instagram. And I will see you there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.